Okay, I'm off my phone now. So we had a little timeout with the GoPro, and we are back up. All these things, like I said, it's a learning process, ironing out the kinks.
Totally.
We're artists trying to be techies. I guess you're a little bit techie.
Apparently not.
Apparently not. Okay, so Paul is going to fill in the rest of his mountain range. And for the rest of us, we can go ahead and get started on... This is where I'm going to deviate a little bit from the way the steps go on the sheet. So I'm going to have us do stars. My favorite way to do stars, and I actually learned this from a Vigo student, which is really funny because all my years of painting school, all that, and it was a student who taught me. So it proves you can always learn. And anyone who thinks they can't learn anymore is wrong. So I'm my favorite way to do stars, thanks to this one customer years ago, is we use the handle end of the brush, and you kind of use it like a rubber stamp. You're going to stamp it in your white.
Which brush are we using?
Oh, your smallest brush, number 4 round, or whatever small brush you have on hand. And I'm just going to do a little stamp dot, and I keep going. As you do this, your brush handle continues to run out of paint. So you get smaller and smaller stars. So it's doing that nice random work for you. Occasionally, if I have a big one, like the one I started with, I'll feed off of it for more paint. You can usually get about, 7 or 8 out of each dip in the paint. Some people like to, one thing I like to show people, and this is hard to do in class, but I can absolutely do it here. To start off with small stars, when you first dip your brush handle and you get a big glob of paint, so I'll stamp it a few times on the palette before I even touch my canvas with it. And then you get nice small ones from the very beginning. But I do think it's good to have a good variance of star sizes. And then probably one of the most important things is we tend to like things evenly spaced and put in their place, every star half an inch apart. But really, they're not like that in nature. Everything's very random. So you will have a cluster of stars in one part, and then another cluster somewhere else. So if you find that you're doing the very, very common thing where you're placing them and you have a polka dot pattern rather than a scattering of stars, just go back through and cram some stars in little areas to break it up. And while we're on the video, I'll show you something that's not on the original that you can do. And if you've come to Vigo, you have probably done this in class multiple times. And that is where you take a star that you just dotted on there that's still wet, take one of your fingers and really lightly smudge it into a little glowing orb. And then you stamp a little dot right in the center of there. So then you have this sort of glowing star among all these little dots. And I obviously want to do more than one because it feels weird to just have one. So I might do I like odd numbers. Maybe I'll do 3 of them. You wouldn't have as many stars down here where the sky is still a little light, but you can put a few peppered in there. You can reference your picture that came with your box anytime. I keep trying to drag the painting over here, but keep in mind this is a picture of that painting, so you can reference it anytime. Paint your favorite constellation. Okay, I need one more glowy star right there. Boom. The key to doing this right is you are barely touching the canvas. If you push hard, you're going to get more of an opaque circle. If you use very, very light pressure with your finger, you're going to get more of a fade out. Okay. I think I'm just about done. You can always go back and add stars later if you feel like you've got a little barren. Any of the paintings in the studios with stars are usually done by me because I am a lover of stars. Although you've got some pretty good ones in there too, Paul, that do really good, like your Cascadia Sky.
Mm-hmm. That one's a little bit more chaotic.
Yeah, oh, look at, he did a fancy star. So he did just kind of this little plus sign with the brush end. You do not want to use the handle end because you'll run into all kinds of problems. And what he did is he used a little white on the tip of the bristles, and you start in the center and you go out from the center. If you go from the outside in, you'll end up with really square edges. But if you go from the center out, you're going to get these nice little skinny, wispy ends to this. So yours looks like the Wiseman star.
Yeah, we're talking about winter paintings.
You're getting in the mood. Okay, so we are going to now add the pinkish highlight to the mountain. It's very subtle. You know, it's getting dark, so there's not going to be a lot of glow that will go on the mountain. So this time we're going to switch to a different brush. Make sure you wipe off the handle of your little brush, because if that white paint dries on there, it can be tough. And then, you know, later on down the road, you'll have so much on there that you end up with these ginormous stars if you ever try to do that technique again. So make sure you clean the brush handle and the brush tip. But we are going to go to our number 8 now. Number 8, Bright. And you may not be using the same brushes as me, so if you have one that's kind of similar to this, that's perfect. Go ahead and dip it in the water cup. Kind of wake up those bristles a bit, and then dry it real good on your towel. We're just going to mix a pink, so just red. Look at our red, it's really bad. So we're going to mix a little red and a little white till you get kind of I would call it a bubblegum pink, raspberry smoothie. About like that.
We're doing the highlights on the mountains.
We're doing the highlights on the mountains, yep. And when you mix paint, you a lot of times end up with a big glob on your brush. And I've got a little glob, but one of the things I like to do, I'm going to steal this palette. When I'm highlighting mountains, I don't want to add a whole lot of paint, because again, it's that whole thing where you have to figure out where's the paint going to go because you added too much. So I will wipe my brush off on the palette or on your paper towel, so you knock a lot of excess paint that you don't need off the brush. If you do it on your palette, then you've always got it left over. You can go back and use it. I'm just going to scrape down this side here. Let your brush run out of paint, because that is going to help create what looks like little rocks and canyons and craggy things. So, and then on the middle mountain, I'm going to do a little on this side. If you guys have ever watched Bob Ross, you'll know he starts with when he does mountains, he's a legend with mountains. And he'll start with this dark triangular shape, and then he comes in with a palette knife with white and scrapes it down one side, and suddenly you see, whoa, there's a 3D mountain there. That's basically what we're doing. We're using our brush as the palette knife. So if Paul was teaching, he'd probably have you using your biggest brush, right?
Sometimes. Most of the time, yeah, but this kind of is a nice technique to learn too.
The key here, though, is just letting your brush run out of paint. So you're starting with very little. It's a subtle highlight, and by letting it run out of paint, like I said earlier, that's how you get these little valleys and things where you've got darker rocks and canyons and whatnot. You can always add more. That's the theme of the night. You can always add more. Can't take away.
Well, need to add harder. More wine to my wine glass here pretty soon.
Okay, yeah.
Not yet.
Okay.
Just saying, pretty soon.
So there, this is something too, and this is a weird phenomenon, but you can wash your brush whenever you want, when you're done with that. This is something that up close, it looks like a mess. But when you see it from a distance, like I can see it on the monitor right here, it looks really good, and it looks like, oh, I actually did a good job making mountains. So step away from your canvas a lot. My teacher in college always used to make us do that, and we'd be like, wow, you're crazy. And then we do that, and we're like, oh, he's absolutely right. You remember that, don't you?
I do.
No, Leland.
I think one of the things on mountains, too, is that people tend to be too timid with the paint when they do the highlights. They want the color to not be bold, and the bolder you get with it, the more dynamic it looks. So I do my mountains a little different. I use a little bit bolder color.
Let's compare the two. Can we see them both there?
And they both,
I really like yours.
Well, they both look very mountainy and stuff, but you can see the difference between a higher contrast, which is what I used
Yeah. So we used a little bit
softer.
lighter color and a little more opaque color towards the top of the mountain range where the light would be catching it more than, like the light's obviously not going to really catch it down in here, but definitely along the edges. And that's something you can do anytime. So I'll show an example of that, hopefully without botching it. So I would add like a little bit lighter value through here along the edge. All I did was I just pulled a little bit more white in with my paint. Or you can just use a little more paint. So again, it's like putting that Instagram filter on your canvas. Paul is very, very good with mountains. He taught me how to paint mountains. So it's something I never did very good with until I started taking some of his classes. So it is really good to take classes, even if you don't love the painting.
I think maybe I'll do a mountain tutorial one of these days. Let's just paint a mountain, and we'll do that like on YouTube.
Yeah, actually, real quick, I'll talk about that. With the Go Box, we're also going to be uploading other videos that any of you guys can watch, whether you're subscribed or not, where maybe it would be like a half-hour mountain tutorial or a tree tutorial or
water.
One of the things we love to do, we love, instead of carving pumpkins at Halloween, we like to paint them. Now, this is a little small one, but it would be really cute. Like, I've painted Jack Skellington on. The acrylic paint works perfect. It can stay outdoors, get rained on, get abused, and it never rots like when you carve a pumpkin. So that's really fun. You can find all kinds of stuff on Pinterest for different things you can paint on pumpkins. It's limitless. So now we are going to paint this background tree line, which is really, it's not trees. It is trees, but it's not like we're painting trees. It's not like we're painting a whole bunch of these. We're doing a very simple technique. When you look out at a landscape, you don't see individual trees like you would these that are up close. You see a bunch of rough, shrubby looking stuff that are pointy on the tops. And that's what we're going to show you how to paint. This is, again, another technique I learned from Paul. Brush-wise, we want to use our number 8. Make sure it's clean. And we're going to use this skinny edge to do this. I'm going to show you the technique. But let's mix our color first. We want to mix the phthalo blue, which is your indigo, and black. So you're going to get that color. I called it a bruise earlier. Can't unsee it now. You had a bruise that color on your stomach once.
I did. I got hit by a golf ball. It was.
Where were we golfing at? It was like in Redmond.
We were at Crooked River Golf Club.
Yes, and there were some teens with a golf cart, and they didn't yell for. And Paul got drilled right in the stomach. And it left a bruise that was so
about the size of this canvas.
Bad. Oh, it was horrible. So, anyway, back to the painting. This technique, I'm going to show you on paper really quick. I put this piece of paper under my canvas so I could do some drawing techniques for you. To paint this sort of tree line, you use the skinny side of your brush. Obviously, see, there's two sides. You can do it. If you paint with the wide side, you're going to get a really wide line. If you paint with the skinny side, obviously it's a lot smaller. And also, how hard you push makes a difference. Here's a really light pressure. Here's really heavy pressure. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a tree line that kind of, in the studio I tell the students, you're painting a sound wave or a heart rate monitor. So you're going to glue your brush to the canvas. I'm not lifting it at all. And I'm just jiggling my way across the canvas. And so you end up with what looks like a tree line. Now I do go back, you'll occasionally have little gaps, and I'll just go back and fill those in. So you have a nice thick, lush fir tree forest. But yeah, that's what you're going to do. If you lift your brush, you kind of end up with more of a dead grass sort of look. So you don't want to lift your brush. Really glue it to the canvas and use it till you run out of paint. I'm running out of paint really fast on the paper just because it absorbs it really fast. So I'm going to do that on canvas now. You can mix a little water with your paint. That kind of extends it. The nice thing about acrylic paint is it's water soluble. You can thin it out like crazy with water, and for different techniques you might use. But here we go. I'm going to start way over here. Don't worry at all about the bottom edge of this. I want you to only worry about the top edge. Ignore this. We're going to paint over that. But maybe sometimes you'll have a tall tree mixed in there with some shorter ones. Or if it's better for your brain to process it, thinking like, I'm painting a heart rate monitor, or I'm painting a sound wave. honestly, sometimes getting your mind off what you're trying to paint and thinking of it as something else is an excellent way to do things. I have the kids do that in our kids class. So like when we'll paint an animal or something, for the top of the head, I won't say, we're going to paint the top of the head now, because that will make them really get nervous. I just say, we're going to paint a rainbow shape. So we do a rainbow. And then the whole painting goes that way. And in the end, it ends up really good with much less tears involved.
I think one of the, like when we teach this technique in the studio, one of the things that's most difficult for people to get over is not putting branches on these trees.
And not making them green.
right, that too. And, but I always like to point out to people is if you start doing a lot of detail on this background element that's so far back, it makes it feel like it's closer to you, which then makes the mountains feel smaller. Also, it raises the amount of detail you need to do in the foreground to keep up with it. So the further away things are, the less detail you want to put into them. You're just going to have to break yourself of the mindset that it just looks like squiggles.
Yeah, your worst enemy in painting is going to be your mind. And I do it too, even though I've been painting for 20 some years, and I know how, if I move my hand this way, this is going to turn out this way. If I use this amount of paint, it's going to turn out this way. There's still that fear of the unknown, I guess. Sound wave. What song is yours playing?
Red Red Wine by UB40.
Yeah, yours is kind of dramatic, actually. I think yours is playing some kind of classical thunder.
I think mine's actually probably playing Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't know.
Mine's doing Claire de Lune. So I need to give it more Bohemian Rhapsody here. So I really like the way Paul does this part. And, like I said, he's the one who taught me how to do this. And all of our other teachers in the studio learned it from us, too. I like the way his turns out, so I'm going to pull yours over here.
Almost done. Just let me finish it. Just got a couple
Give me
more.
a chance to take a sip of wine.
Yeah, I just got a couple more inches to do here. I actually, when I'm doing these types of trees, I actually intentionally, I do blur the bottom edge, but you don't have to.
You're the one who destroys our brushes in the studio.
That's me.
He loves, this is probably kind of hard for him because we're working with brand new brushes. And he likes those really raggedy ones, and the rougher the better. So yeah, his trees turn out really nice. He does a good job of making some that are really short and scrubby, mixed in with some tall ones. So definitely Paul kills landscapes. It's really good. Nice job, buddy.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do need to blur the bottom. Paul already did his, but what I want to do is, let me show you the original here. These trees are sort of, it's like they're casting a shadow, but what it does is it kind of almost makes it look like there's a fog resting back there, and it just sort of blurs everything out, rather than this really harsh edge. Let's compare that versus that. Right now I've got a real pointy edge because the bottom of the trees matches the top. So I'm going to take a little more of that color on my brush, and you can use this brush or you can use the biggest one. Here's what it's going to do when I'm using this little brush, number 8. It works just fine. If I use the bigger brush, it'll work good too, and you can kind of cover more area quicker and with less of your brain going, hey, wait, stop, what are you doing? Sometimes it's best to just get it done. It's kind of like bungee jumping for the first time. You just do it. You just jump. And one of the things I want to do, I need a little more black in mine, is on either side we've got these trees which are going to have shadows around them. So I'm going to kind of pre-paint those. I'm just going to bring, with that black and blue mix, this one you might want to use your big guy. Just let your brush sort of run out of paint. I don't have a lot on my brush. I never do at this point because, again, it's like trying to figure out where it has to go. And here's what you can do too. I feel like I kind of messed that up a little bit. I'm just gonna wash and dry my brush really good. And just sort of lightly smooth over the top with just a slightly damp brush.
You doing both sides?
Yep.
I already did this right hand side pretty dark to begin with.
Well, look at you jumping the gun.
You know, I've never done one of our bonfire paintings.
Oh, I get to teach you how to paint fire.
Fire.
Okay, that looks pretty good. I can see in the video this one's a little harsh. Maybe I'll just wash my brush, dry it off, and just use the damp brush to sort of ghost it out of there. So keeping the darkness, but definitely a much better fade, and I can do this one too if needed. While it's still wet, it works good. Alright. This painting could almost stand alone as it is, but you guys are going to learn how to paint fir trees and tents and bonfires. So what I want to do is, obviously this is still really wet. We can't paint a bonfire right now or we would end up with a gray bonfire, which would be horrible. So let's take our number 8 brush and wash it off. Although if you've got the black and blue color on it, we're going to use that again. So no need to wash it if you still have that color on. We are going to paint this little stand of rock, I guess, right through here. And if you want, you can do a matching one over there. And yeah, let's do it. Okay, so this is pretty easy. Your black and blue mix. And I just come up maybe an inch from the bottom left corner and just work my way across close to the center-ish, kind of, sort of. And mine is kind of flat and there's no real drama to it, so maybe I'll add a little bump here. And
you know, it would be really funny to add onto this. It'd be like a little trash panda sitting on the rock.
A raccoon.
Yeah.
Remember that time you added a hobbit to your waterfall painting?
I do. It was perfect.
Actually, I found that in the storage unit the other day. He had a little hobbit smoking a pipe, and there's a little curl of smoke coming up.
If you saw the whole painting, it would make sense.
It worked really good. It totally looked like Middle Earth, and we're huge Lord of the Rings fans, so...
You are.
You are. Remember when you had to buy both the regular version and then when the extended version came out, we had to buy all 3 again?
It's true, and I always fall asleep during the White Tower. Is that the two? No, the 2 towers. I always fall asleep during that one.
Is it called the 2 Towers?
I
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. That movie came out a long time ago.
I can never remember because I always fall asleep during
Our son was an infant. Yeah, he was like 1 when that movie came out. Now
That's
he's
true.
turning 19 on Monday. Crazy. All right, Paul. Pass your wine glass over here. We got this Deuce Cellar Syrah to get through. There's always a tomorrow.
No, there's not. Red wine goes bad so fast. We might make
About
sure
3 days. Yep.
Yeah.
I hope that was your phone.
It's my phone.
Okay, so
How embarrassing.
I'm gonna show you guys how to paint fir trees. Now, your phone needs to shut up.
I told it to be quiet.
Okay, so I have 2 on here, which surprises me. I usually work in 3s or odd numbers. It's just, I don't know, painter's preference, the Holy Trilogy, I don't know. So I'm gonna show you guys.
Now, to be fair,
Yes.
the bonfire in this mimics that same basic shape, so you still have the 3.
Okay, look at you. Thinking about
Improvising.
it like an artist.
Making excuses as we roll.
He's good at BSing.
Yes.
So, I'm going to show you on paper how to paint trees. Please don't psych yourself out about these. I'm going to show you problems to avoid and how to make the best trees you can for now. And if they don't turn out 100% right, they're fixable. You can always sort of touch them up. And when we add highlights on them, let me pull this out again. These highlights help thin them out too. It kind of gives them more of a 3D quality. And we will do that. But here's what I see in the studio a lot. So I always like to start with drawing the tree trunk first because then I have a nice post to work from. And most of the tree trunk doesn't show. I know you do them without a tree trunk now. That's a
Ew.
little crazy. So what Paul does is he goes through and he's like doing it this way. Which I suppose, I don't know, how does Bob do it? Does he paint a tree trunk first?
Sometimes, and the reason I'll let you explain the other part, because you're showing what not to do, right? Or,
Well, I was just showing how you do it.
Okay. Well, clearly it wasn't what not to do then.
Clearly.
Clearly.
Okay, so what I see in the studio a lot is the students do what I call the fishbone tree. These are really droopy and they're spaced way far apart. This is super common.
That's why I do it without a trunk, by the way.
Okay.
Because it removes that instinct to just place them coming off of the trunk, and it makes you create the shape.
So I'm going to write, no, please. Okay, so you don't want to do that. This, if you end up with this, which a lot of people do, even though, you know, we've gone through it, it's just natural. So if you end up with this sort of thing, it's easy to fix. It's not like, oh, I'm stuck, I've got this great painting in the tree I botched. No, all you have to do is just go through and add a whole bunch more boughs and maybe make the point top a little pointier. And see how I'm kind of lifting and dabbing my brush? That gives it more of a furry look. But see, I took that tree from a fishbone looking thing to looking more like a somewhat natural tree. And then, yeah, a lot of people tend to make them a little droopy like this, which you do see trees like that, but they're usually like in northern Finland covered under 4 feet of snow. So your tree is not necessarily going to droop down like that. This kind of Dr. Seussy works great for a whimsical drawing. And then the other thing I see is people start too wide. Mm-hmm. So then they end up with, like, suddenly by the end, they've set themselves too wide in the beginning. So here, let me draw my tree trunk. Oh, that's a good one. So usually what happens here is they know they're supposed to get wider as they go down the tree. And suddenly you're committed and you've got this huge tree like this that takes up your whole entire canvas. So don't fall into the trap of making it too wide at first. In fact, I always tell the students, make it too narrow because you can always make it wider. So let's do a tree the way they're supposed to look. So we're going to do a little no, sad face, no. Well, this is yes sometimes if you're doing Dr. Seuss. Or painting of Finland.
And I would actually say that, like, even this one is a good framework
totally
to start
fixable.
with.
Yep, good framework to start with. So let me scoot I'm running out of room here showing you all the no things. So I'm going to move this. Here's how I do fir trees. Yeah, I'm good, okay.
Yep, you're good.
I like to start from the ground and going up because then I can set the height. Some people like to start from the sky going down. It does not matter. I have students that do one and others that do the other. So my trunk is not great. Obviously it's a little too skinny, but I'm not going to worry about it because it gets completely covered up. This brush can be used all different ways. You can have this little tiny corner, which you can use to make little tiny dots. It works perfect for that. So I use the corner of this flat, I guess called a bright brush. And at the top, I do maybe a row of, I don't know, 7 or 8 dots. Think about it in terms of like a Christmas tree. That's the one thing that pokes up that you put your Christmas star on. And usually in nature, it's hard to find one that's perfectly straight up and down. So in the painting world, you can make it straight up and down. But use the corner of the brush, so you do those nice fine little dots. And see, if you press hard, you get big ones. If you press light, you get little ones. So bear that in mind. Now I'm going to turn my brush this way. So I'm using the wide edge of the brush, and I'm going to tap out a little tiny mustache. So you've got your little hipster mustache. At the top, it's not wide, it's very narrow, because you can add to it. Starting out wide, you end up with this one. You're going to avoid that. Okay. So then just under that little mustache, I'm going to tap out another one that's just a fraction wider. See how close they are together? There's not a lot of airspace between them. And then I tap out another one. And see how I'm sort of curving them a little bit upward on the edges rather than doing the droopy thing. It's kind of more like this. They look like happy trees that way. Bob Ross was onto something. And by lifting and tapping my brush, you're making it look furry.
Gosh, I hope his kid doesn't see us and hear us referencing him all the time, because then they'll sue us.
I doubt he will look at some random Bingo video.
You never know. You never know.
Unless we get to where we're like having thousands, hundreds of thousands of views. So already mine's pretty. It's like even width. It almost looks like a corn cob. And so that's where I would look at it. Maybe I'd go all the way down to the bottom, and then I'd go and okay, like here I'm going to start getting a little wider. Because it's real easy to end up with a tree that's just a telephone pole. But I think you probably kind of get what I'm doing here. My trunk is no longer visible. You can bring the foliage all the way down to the ground. That's what I have in the original. But some types of fir trees, you see the exposure of the tree trunk. So that's up to you. Plant your own tree, whatever you want. And then, you know, you can come in and you can add more foliage. You can split the ends of these. And make it shaggier just by... Basically, that's all I'm doing. I'm taking a tree bough like that, and I'll just add a little split end to it. Or another.
I feel like in the studio, the biggest struggle people have with when they might get the shape right, but they put everything too close together. You know, like it's a little too compact.
The picture-in-picture is blocking.
Oh. Well, I can turn that off.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I moved it over.
But you know what I mean? And then when you step back, it just looks like a wedge of black because everything's so tight together.
Yeah, so you do want to leave a little airspace.
Yeah, I kind of think like I always tell people like about a 1/4 inch-ish.
Maybe leave some airspace so you got kind of borderline fishbone, and then go back and add some tree boughs. So I have these on my original. Let me show it again. They're 2 different heights because you don't want it to be exact. That's too HOA-ish. We live in one of those. We don't want to paint one. So I'm just going to parallel the side of the canvas. That's your perfect little straight edge tool. Just parallel it, go up about as high as you want. I'm going to do this one too. Maybe I'll drop it down a little lower and make it go a little taller in the sky. Oh, but I don't want to cover up that beautiful star.
Ignore the star.
Okay, so I have really not so hot tree trunks, but again, I'm not going to worry about it because I know they'll be covered up. At the top of each, use the corner of the brush. Do a little row of like 7 or 8 of those dots. If you feel more comfortable using the small brush doing that, you can. Then you're going to turn your brush using it this way and make your little tiny short hipster mustache. Oh, here, I'll have a little peekaboo star, so I think that'll work. So at first, it really does look like an arrow that's pointing up. And I'll do another, a little bit wider. Another just a fraction wider. Oh, my pretty stars! I can't get too attached to some of the stuff in the background. But see, yeah, I do leave a little airspace, particularly on the edges. Again, try leaving some airspace, then going back and seeing if something looks funny. Fill it on in. A few little dabs will do ya. Oh, I'm covering up my nice mountain highlighting too. Like I said, you can't get too attached to some of the stuff in the painting.
Well, the tree never steps aside for the mountain.
It never does. As much as we want it to sometimes for that great photo op. So, I am artist in residence up at Skamania Lodge in the Gorge in Stevenson, Washington. And we are there several times a month teaching art classes, whether it's a public class they have up there or a corporate event. We get a lot of corporate retreats. It's a lot of fun. But one of the things Paul and I have tried to do just for fun is try to find the perfect tree because there's so many trees up there. And it's a long drive. So, you know, we'll look along the highway as we're going along.
I think we have them memorized by now.
Probably, but there was one tree that we found that was, we could call it the ideal, perfect, clouds open, the sun shines down upon it, perfect tree. And then it blew over in a storm.
Yeah, it was a little awkward seeming. It seemed out of place, so.
Yeah. Most of them are windblown and they'll have foliage on one side, but not on the other just because of the wind patterns up there. And it's just something you don't really notice. You just see lots of trees. So and when you're painting them, it's like you're hyper-focused and you want the perfect tree. Okay, I'm almost caught up.
I cheated.
Racing through. One thing you may want to do is you can smudge a little, whatever black is left on your brush, smudge a little down here to make a shadow at the base of the tree. And I just sort of let my brush run out of paint. I guess you kind of did that, didn't you, Paul?
I like it when trees don't look like they have a real distinct connection to the ground.
Oh, okay.
I like it when they just kind of disappear
me too. When they just
into
sort
the
of
shadows.
like dissipate out, and that's how you get that with this shading that you do here. And I've got a little dry thing going on here. What I'll do in that case is I'll wash my brush, and dry it off, so I just have a damp brush. And look at that, I can just use it almost like a watercolor. You can even use your finger and smudge things out. Lots of tools. All right, we're looking good here. I think we are dry enough through here and here. We're ready to paint the bonfire and tent. So one of the things I do is I paint the highlight on the ground first, and that's going to be around where the bonfire goes. It's a big bonfire, so it casts a lot of light everywhere. So we're going to wash off our number 8 brush, and if you feel like you absolutely have to change your water, you can definitely do that. You can pause us. Make sure we're making cute faces. But my water stays like this through all my paintings. In the studio, I don't get to get off the stage very much and change it out. So what I do is I rub the brush on the bottom of the cup, and then I just dry it really good. And it's going to, by drying it, kind of squeeze your paper towel around it, you're going to knock off a lot of excess pigment.
If you take good care of your brushes, they'll last forever.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they will wear down over time, but...
Especially if you're using them.
Yeah. But then you just find a different purpose for them.
Yeah, it's true. I use them to hold a bun in my hair sometimes.
That's not what I mean, but
Okay, so we're gonna make a little bit lighter yellow. If we use just a straight yellow on top of the blue, it turns kind of greenish. So to counter that, I mix white and yellow together. You'll get a color that I guess it kind of looks like butter, lemon curd, whatever.
Look like butter.
And again, you've got a big glob on your brush from mixing paint. A big glob going on here is difficult because then you have to figure out where to put it all. So I am going to take and dab it on my towel a couple times so I have just a little paint. I suppose I could do a little more yellow in there. And then I am going to just start where the bonfire would be centered, and I'm going to go up from there. Just let the brush run out of paint. So your major highlight's going to kind of be this central area. And I'm going to come down to the bottom of the canvas. I try not to make it like a perfect tornado, so like some areas it's going to be a little wider.
I like this with a little bit more white, actually.
Yeah, it's a little greenish with just the yellow. There we go. Just sort of scrub it on. Add more paint, little at a time, as needed for areas where you maybe want it a little more opaque. But all you need is a little gentle highlight on the ground.
Don't wait for me.
All right, so I'm going to wash and dry my brush. And now we're finally going to use the brush end of the little guy, number 4 brush, number 4 round. And I'm going to use the same color. I do like to get the brush a little bit wet at first and dry it on the towel. I start with a damp brush. It seems to kind of get those bristles softened up and glued together. I'm going to use the same white-yellow mixture. And this is painted a lot like the tree in Van Gogh's Starry Night, kind of like a funky cypress tree. And here's what I do. I paint the bottom round. So you're going to paint like a smile. And then I just go up from there, and my goal is to make a wavy little teardrop shape. It can go as tall as you want, and the top can just be really pointy. We're just sort of sketching it out. So you can see it looks a lot like Van Gogh's Starry Night, the Italian cypress tree that's in that painting. And here's what I do. The flames kind of go up towards the sky, so I'll make, these are going straight up. Just little, like hairs almost. So they're going straight up. Usually won't shoot outward too much. You can put as many of these on as you want. But it just looks like a hairy teardrop. And then I'll use my number 8 brush and fill it on in with that white and yellow mixture. I think I got some of my white taken out of there. Now you will sometimes see through a fire, so don't worry if you're seeing some of the trees and stuff through the background. We're going to add more color to this, so like I said, don't worry if you... Like, I kind of like where you've got areas where you can see through it and then areas that are more opaque. I'm going to take orange on the same brush, even though I didn't wash it. I just still have the yellow on there. And we're going to mix some of this. It makes sort of a sunny delight color. Some of this orangey color up through here. Let it mix together. Kind of focusing on the outside edges, not so much on the inside because we're going to put some white there. You can also, if you want, you can put a little of this orangey color that's left on your brush on the ground. And we'll wash that brush and set it aside. Take a little sippy of your wine if needed. Or tea, or whatever it is you're drinking. It does not have to be wine. Beer, cider. Okay, so...
Whiskey.
So for the tent, here I'm going to show you, you have your instruction sheet. It says to paint a droopy triangle, and that's exactly what it is. Your choice here is to decide how big you want it. So that original painting that you guys have the pictures of is right here. It's done on a canvas board. And I did a really big bonfire and a pretty big tent. And on the one I've been showing you all night, I did it as a refresher. I ended up with a little bit smaller tent and a little bit smaller bonfire. So you can decide. I think you got paint on me.
Did I?
I don't know. You can decide which look you like. I guess I can't show both. Whether you want a bigger tent that goes kind of up into the height, is into the forest up here, or a little one that's down below.
So something to keep in mind when you're picking on that size. Just something, I'm going to throw my input in a little bit again.
Okay.
The smaller you make the tent, the larger the overall outdoors is going to feel, because people are going to recognize the tent as a scale.
Yes, scale.
So if you make the tent really big, then all of a sudden your trees might feel really little.
Yep. So decide where you want your tent. Do you want it way over here? Do you want it really close to the bonfire? It's kind of a fire hazard the way we put it together, I guess. But I'm just going to... You know what you can do? I started drawing, but you can pick where you want the top of the tent to be. I'll put it right here. I'm just going to put a little dot. And then I'm going to just make that kind of droopy triangle. So the fabric of the tent just sort of hangs. And then I'll paint the base across the bottom. It'll be straight. Then I'm going to switch to my number 8 brush just to fill it in. Yours looks like a Campfire Girls tent.
Totally.
And I'll just fill it in with that color with my number 8 brush. I've used round brushes in the past. I probably experimented when I started Vango 8 years ago. I experimented with probably 10 or 12 different brush brands. I found that I like the Simply Simmons because I feel like they're the right amount of stiffness to flexibility. It's not too floppy and it's not too stiff. And yeah, I just I like these a lot, and I like using the flat brushes because then you can get into these little edges. With a round brush, they're a little harder to teach with. So now for the sides of the tent. We've got our, it almost looks like an army green fabric, but it's just your yellow and black mixed together. We'll do that real quick. So just take whatever yellow's on your brush right now, mix some black with it. You're gonna get, it's kind of a greenish, like an army green color. You decide how dark you want it. I kind of start with it maybe a little lighter, and then as I get towards the back of the tent, I might brush in a little more black just to make it look like it's away from the light source. So I'm gonna go across the top here. And then this angle you paint back here should match this angle. And it should be about the same length too. It could be a little shorter, give it more perspective. Then this is going to angle back here. So you've got your little 3D shape, and I'll just brush some of this color in, starting from the front of the tent. Let that yellow that's wet mix with it. As I get about halfway back, I'm going to just dip my brush in black and kind of streak that in there and let it get darker towards the back of the tent. It can be kind of streaky. Are we still recording?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. I would hate to get all the way through this and realize it had stopped or something timed out.
Maybe it didn't record at all. I don't know.
Oh, that would suck. Don't jinx us. Okay, wash your brush.
Yeah. Beard hair got in the way. Yeah.
What is happening?
Sorry. It's so rude of me.
Okay, so same brush. I just washed it and I squeezed the paint water out of it onto the towel to knock off excess paint pigment. And I'm going to put a little of that white-yellow mix down on the ground under the tent. So this is where it starts looking like it's underwater. Here we've got water. Here, let me hold up the original here. Let's see, down there. And on this one, I even reflected a little of the tent pole, which I'll show you. We're actually getting pretty close to the end of this, so. If you want, you can kind of make a reverse triangle shape or just sort of suggest that.
The light from the tent's coming from the kids on their iPads.
That's exactly right. Speaking of the light in the tent, I do like to sometimes just take pure yellow and brush little spots of it in here, almost like kaleidoscope-like. So we have like a warm glow. You could even put a little orange in there, but I wouldn't go too crazy with the orange. Okay, gonna wash that brush. We're gonna let the tent dry just a little. It's really crooked. Sorry, everybody. We're learning.
You guys should see our setup.
We're learning with you.
There's not any duct tape that close.
Yeah. Hey, we actually did a pretty good job.
We did a pretty good job.
Yeah. So, okay, so now I'm going to, we're going to paint logs under the fire. Ooh. And those, I made a brown just by mixing black and the orange together. And I just kind of did like a squashed X. And then you can add some extra ones in there if you want. Everybody builds their bonfire differently. But yeah, just here, I'll hold this up here. Mix a little black and orange together. More orange, I'll turn it a little more on the brown side. See, our palette looks amazing. And I'm using my little brush, but Paul's using his number 8. It really doesn't matter. But yeah, the squashed X thing seems to work really good. So I might start with that, and then I'll thicken these up a little. And they're not going to be perfectly smooth. These are like sticks and things people have found in the forest. Unless you bring your own firewood. And then maybe you add like 1 or 2 extra little things poking out there. Mine kind of looks like a spooky.
Well, it is getting to be that time of
year. It is getting to be that time of year. And while I've got this color on the brush, I will use it to very lightly sketch the tent pole in.
Ooh, what color is that? Oh.
It's just the brown. Orange and black. And then if you want to be fancy and reflect it down on the ground a little bit,
oops, I got my head.
Just sort of dot it on there real lightly. Suggest it. Or you can use your finger and smear down. That works really good. We are nearing completion.
Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, 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 dun. Let's see. There we go. Straighten that boy up. Okay. So, what I want to have us do now is your campfire is probably pretty dry. Even if it's a little bit wet, that's okay. And this is where you can use really thick paint if you want. But we want to put in the white hot center. And I did use thick paint. And I just sort of dabbed it on there. I wanted it to not look like it's like a perfectly smoothed out thing. The fire's sort of rippling and the wind is blowing. And we're going to make that happen on the canvas. So go ahead and take your brush and pick up a nice little glob of white. I start down in here. And see how I'm sort of lifting and tapping my brush? And I'm keeping it in the center of the fire. I just realized we haven't eaten dinner. What time is it? 9:21 and we're not even hangry.
That's what you think.
You're probably the most hangry.
I ate lunch today.
Okay, so now let's put some sparks on the fire. You already did that. You're always 1 or 2 steps ahead.
Sorry.
So you can see them on the original. Let me see if I can hold that up a little closer.
It totally looks like Alfred Hitchcock.
What?
There's a little orange. There's his nose.
Pareidolia. Okay, so there's lots of little dots. I do these all with the brush end, but very little paint on the tip of the bristles of your littlest brush. I do orange and yellow, and like here's the amount of paint I put on the brush. I don't even know if you can even see it. I'll lift it way up there towards you, camera. There, tiny little bit of paint. Okay, so then I'm just going to sort of dab little dots at the top of these little licks of flame. And they can even be like in the fire here and there, down here lower. These things were always scary. We did a lot of camping when I was young. Now I like this sort of view, but from my hotel room.
Not me.
Yeah, you're a camper. I probably got a little like done with it when I was young. My dad was always grumpy whenever we'd go camping, so I'm like, yeah, I'll just stick to having a nice warm shower.
I guess that's why I started an art adventure.
That is why, yeah.
Channel. So if you saw the comments earlier, Art Adventures with Shilly, that's me. That's my YouTube channel. It's going to be starting in support of the Go Box. I'm going to get outside and do some adventuring around the Pacific
With
Northwest.
all your spare time.
I'm going to have to create some spare time, but I'm going to make it work. I'm going to make it work.
Okay, so I'm going to have us paint some little highlights on the wood itself. I just mixed yellow and orange. You're going to, again, get that kind of color I called Sunny Delight. Little brush and yellow and orange mixed together. And we'll highlight the top edge of these, like the fire's just kissing the top edge here. Getting ready to burn.
Fire.
Okay, and let's wash that brush off. Now we want to use straight orange, and we're going to paint the tent flaps. We just have a couple steps left here. So the tent flaps, they're kind of just like, basically they're curtains that have been pulled aside. I painted them in orange, but really you could use any color. If you want them Bahama blue, you could have them Bahama blue. It's your tent. You can style it how you want. If you want them black with white polka dots, you can do black with white polka dots. So I'll go ahead and stick with what I did on that original. And first I come across the top and I just sort of trace down. And I make the bulk of the fabric down towards the bottom. So you can almost do like you're painting a weird teardrop shape.
Ah. Too much water.
And then I'll go down the other side as well. And sort of, again, that kind of teardroppy shape. Just basically the bulk of the fabric is down on the bottom. I like yours, Paul.
I like yours.
It's really
Jen.
fun to see done by a different hand. And you guys should post your paintings too. So tell them where they can post their
So
paintings.
you can go, we just, earlier this week we started a Go Box Facebook group, which you should all join. Just go into Facebook and look for the Go Box group.
Art Crate. It's called the Go Box Art Crate
group. You can share your pictures there. Also, if you're a member on GoBox.com, everybody has access to be able to upload their pictures in the forum and stuff like that. But I think the Facebook group is going to be a really cool thing to do. But we definitely want to see how you guys do with your paintings.
Yeah, and you can discuss like maybe issues you had or questions you had about this painting, which when we do finally get it going live, those are things you can post as we're working. You can say, hey, Jenny, what color did you say? Or whatever you need to know. or Paul, whoever's teaching. And yeah, but please share your artwork. I think that's really fun. People love seeing other people's artwork, and don't be ashamed or anything. Everybody does such an amazing job, and they all look different.
For the most part, when we're going forward, one of us, whoever's teaching, the other person will probably be sitting on the computer changing scenes and stuff like that. So
hopefully not me.
Well, I guess we can train the kids to do that too. But I know we've got a couple of friends lined up to do some paintings with us in the next month or so.
Yeah, we have a lot of friends who are business owners that we'd like to feature their businesses, and so we'll have them on painting with us. So that'll be kind of fun. I have wine stomping Lucille Ball coming in October. She's going to paint with me, so that'll be a lot of fun. Okay, so let's finish this guy up. Let's do our little tent stakes, which are little black X's. I just, at each corner, with my little brush, did a little black X. That was kind of an afterthought I added when I did this painting. Like right here is a good spot.
We're doing those
tent stakes.
Tent stakes.
Back here.
Oh, I keep having too much water on my brush. If you do that, all you have to do is take a clean corner of your paper towel and just blot it off.
Well, it's really easy to happen because when you wash your brush, you might sometimes have a drop that's left here and it's just slowly rolling down. And then it reaches your bristles and suddenly it's on your canvas. And you never knew it was there. All right, one last step and we will be ready to sign these up. I think it took us, let's see, it's about 9:30. We probably got started at 8 once the techie stuff happens. So about an hour and a half. That's about where I want these videos to go. And like I said, we'll post some short ones too. I probably will even do some food videos because before Vingo, I worked in a cupcake bakery. I was assistant baker and head cake decorator. So I've got a lot of good artsy stuff we can do with food. Okay, so I'm going to use my number 8 brush. And what we're going to do for our last step is we're going to put some highlights on the trees facing the bonfire. So basically this is our light source. It is definitely going to cast some light down on these trees. But don't use too much paint because you don't want it to look like the trees are on fire themselves. But what I did is I mixed orange and yellow together. Our palette looks heavenly. And so that I don't have a big glob of paint, swipe it on your palette or swipe it on your towel. Just knock off excess paint pigment. And think about, like, this is your light source. It's gonna like he's gonna kiss under these boughs that are up here. So on the underside, and then as we get down in the middle, it'll probably be just right on the edge. You can even bring it in a bit towards the middle tree trunk area.
I got a little too...
Go too heavy? Your trees are on fire?
No. I was doing a little bit more of a lime color, like a green.
Ah.
And it was a little too... trying to think of a little bit too pastel-y green. So it didn't look like it glow as much.
So Eric and I, he's one of our artists. You may have taken classes from him. He's one of our favorites. He is the greatest teacher. I'm going to try to get him to teach some of these classes too. We trained on this painting on one of our wood organ boards recently, and he and I, at the end, we had fun with it, and I painted Bigfoot on mine, and then I looked over and he had painted his trees on fire, so they had like licks of flame and sparks, and he'd probably be mortified if he knew I was saying that right now because he is so funny that way. But yes, it was hilarious. We had a good laugh at that. You can have fun with your painting, even if it means putting trees on fire or a Bigfoot.
Painting should always be fun.
It should always be fun.
You know, something else that I did a little bit that you could do too is I added a little, almost like with our mountains, just a little bit of highlight on our little rocks.
Oh, you put other rocks over there too. Let's show yours.
Wait,
okay, yeah, let's let you finish up. He put another little, like this, over on this side. Probably a slightly different shape. But he's right. We could put some highlights on this down in here. Honestly, when this video is over, you guys could keep going and experimenting and see what works and what doesn't. You can paint over anything. Let's have a look-see, Paul. Very nice. Look at our two styles together. Let's see. I'll hold yours here. I like that you did your tent pole shadow at an angle. That's really nice touch there. And you can see that our styles are very different. Well, you can look on the paper that came with your box and see what mine looks like. But yeah, and he did make the tent smaller, so this does give the mountains a lot more of a grandiose feel. I really like the way the bonfire turned out. You said you've never painted fire, really? So nice job, Paul.
Thank you.
You can follow instructions.
Maybe what we should do is at the end of the video, we should post both of our paintings.
Yeah.
Like just
do
put
it.
a little screenshot of them or something.
We can do that.
Okay.
So what could we do? You guys are done. All you have to do is sign it. But I'll sign it real quick and then we'll have a quick little talk and then we'll be done. Any color you want. I just always put my initials down in one of the corners. And so what could we do, Paul, if we wanted to make this not look like the tent and the fire are sitting in a puddle of water?
Probably the easiest thing would be to add texture to the ground.
Maybe a little black and orange, brownish texture?
I mean, I think right now the way it is, it would be hard to come back and add it at this point.
Yeah.
But give the idea that maybe... I'm going to reach over onto yours real quick. I'm going to point.
Well, I could, like, take a little brownish...
Well,
make some rocks.
Like up in this area, kind of make it feel like it disappears into the trees a little bit more instead of having just this harsh line, which gives the impression of like a shoreline.
Mm-hmm.
But
we're in the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, I think just adding some, like if you were going to take
like little rocks or something. Like here's a rock.
Rocks, shrubs, things like that.
Of course, rocks poke out of water too.
Yeah. But I think the main thing would be is probably more like in the beginning stage of this painting is to add more texture instead of being quite so smooth.
Yeah.
In this base area where Jenny's adding these rocks and stuff. Yeah, you could do. It'd be kind of neat. I'm gonna do it.
So I've got this rock here. It would definitely have a lot of orangey, yellow highlight.
Missing? I'm gonna add something real quick. See
okay.
See if you like this. This is where we get to experiment around a little bit.
Now they have a little bumpy seat to sit on.
That's what I'm putting. Is a little ring of
logs
around where people can sit.
Pilings. You put in a cactus or a tumbleweed.
You know, the other thing, I mean, there's a lot of things you could do. You can add more smaller trees that are in between the size of our large trees and our background trees if you want to kind of break it up. There's all kinds of things you can do, though, that can make it feel not quite so smooth and like it's water.
Yep.
It's still dripping water like crazy off this brush.
Sounds like a personal problem.
It is.
All right. That's it. Please post your artwork. Share with your friends. We'll have another video, and hopefully it will be all ready with our computer purchase to be live next Wednesday, and that will be Tokati Falls. I have the painting. It's in the other room, so I won't bore you with getting up and going there and disturbing the dogs. But yeah, I hope you guys had a good time. Let us know any feedback you have. This is very new to us, just like it's new to you. And the way that we get better at things is by your feedback. So let us know if you felt like, oh, hey, I didn't feel like I had enough paint, or I felt like you went too fast, or I had a lot of questions.
If you go too fast, they can always pause.
Yes, you can pause, except for the live video, but that's recorded later, so...
Yeah.
I mean, it's recorded and you can watch it later, so... Anyways, hope you guys had as much fun as we did. I think we're going to eat dinner now that we've drank on an empty stomach. But cheers to you guys. Thank you so much for supporting us over the years. It's been 8 years next month, October 12th. 8 years of Vine Go. It's been a wild, fun ride. Thank you so much. Cheers! Yes. Good job.